Hi, my name's Elijah, and welcome to my podcast, Songwriting for Songwriters. Joining me today is creative polymath Jamie Catto. Jamie was a founder member of Faithless and was responsible in part for some of their biggest hits like Don't Leave and Insomnia. He then went on to form One Giant Leap, the first album of which is one of my favourite albums of all time. He's also a filmmaker. He made a great film about Ramdas called Becoming Nobody. He's a filmmaker, a writer, a creative work coach, a great man, and I had one of the greatest conversations I've had on Songwriting for Songwriters with Jamie. Very, very inspiring indeed. So please enjoy this podcast episode and subscribe and follow and share. And also remember, you can grab a copy of my book, The Songwriter's Handbook, which is available on Amazon by Elijah Wolf. In that book, there are 52 ideas and themes for you to think about, which might have helped you find a creative spark or seed of an idea for your own song, whether you're a professional, amateur, or you just fancy having a go. So again, please subscribe and follow, and check out Jamie Catto's music on One Giant Leap and under his own name as well, and enjoy this podcast. Thanks for listening. Joining me today on the Songwriting for Songwriting podcast is Jamie Catto. Jamie, how are you?
Great, thank you very much.
You're good. You've just released a new album, which is amazing. I've been listening to it this morning. Can you tell me a little bit about how that feels to have got a new work out there again?
Yeah, it's great. I realized that so much of my musical writing and creations have been really melancholy and longing and yearning, which I love. But I actually created a field of longing and yearning around my life,
Okay.
which is what you do and whatever you create. And I suddenly had it in my head, I want to make something which is about having, not yearning,
Okay.
and something a bit more joyful, and also to dedicate something to all the conscious movement facilitators and dance teachers, like to really honor the work they do, keeping everyone moving.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it feels really good. So I put the word out, and this great producer, composer called Matt Coldrick joined up with me. And then we found Igor Ezendam, the great shamanic, crazy, mad shepherd voice that's on the record, and Kaushalia, who's from Estonia. And just everyone arrived at the great moment, and it just really came together really easily and joyfully.
Fantastic. Well, one of the things I love about your work, I mean, I have to say thank you, first of all, because the One Giant Leap album and Becoming Nobody are two of my favorite pieces of creation ever. And I had got the One Giant Leap album when I was at art college, and it is one of my favorite albums of all time. And one of the things I love about what you do is you collaborate a lot, and there's different, it's always you can always hear you in it, but there's all these different collaborations. What do you gain from collaboration?
Well, first of all, I don't play anything very well. I play all the instruments well enough to compose, but I don't play well enough to actually lay down good takes. So I always have to have geniuses like Dave Randall on guitar, Matt Coldrick now on guitar, Igor, Kaushalia, whoever. And there's this kind of fun, mad scientist mystery about being an artist where you get A plus B, you don't know what C is going to be, like, wow, like One Giant Leap, let's get together with Harry Prasad Shirazia, the flute master, but let's also mix that with the drummers from Kokrobite in Africa, and you don't know what's going to come out the other end. And that mystery, I do these albums also called The Happening, where we get a group of master musicians together for a week, and we just talk themes. We talk like making a movie score for a movie that doesn't really exist.
Right.
And everyone just kind of bounces off each other. And yeah, the great mystery and delight of seeing what's going to come out the other end is what really turns me on.
Fantastic. You started out, you were a founder member of Faithless, which and then you kind of moved on to your own thing, but that obviously Faithless are like a massively well loved and respected group. It must have been a very exciting time to be a founder member of something like that, and then to kind of get royalties and see that thing kind of really grow into something massive. How was that experience for you? Because many musicians that listen to this and songwriters all have different journeys. Some are successful, some are semi-successful. You've had that experience of creating something and it becoming successful. How was that for you?
Amazing and unexpected. And it's actually, I'm glad you brought it up for other artists, because it's a real lesson in anything can happen if you just keep at it.
Yeah.
Everybody told us when we did Faithless that it was a bad idea.
Right.
And in those days, you can't mix a black hip hop artist with a white ballad singer with a house DJ. No one will know where to rack it in the shop. No one will know what press to put it in. Like, it's going to confuse everybody.
Right.
There was a problem for the marketing people, and they were quite right. For the first year, we didn't even sell 5,000 copies worldwide.
Right.
And then, as the great unexpected God fairies decree, um, the wonderful gay people of Munich decided that they wanted one of our songs to be their main song on the Pride March, on
Right.
the parade.
Okay.
And so everyone was listening to Insomnia suddenly,
Wow.
and it just kicked off in Germany because of that.
Right.
And then, of course, we went from Germany to Austria, and Austria to Switzerland, and Switzerland to France, and it just like spread. And by the time it hit the summer, it come back to England, and we re-released it, and suddenly we're like #2 in the charts, beaten only by the Spice Girls.
Do you have a favorite Spice Girl?
Do I have a favorite spot? I always got on best with Sporty Spice. She was always the most like
Yeah, she seems nice, nice, nice
up
lady.
for a laugh. Yeah, they're all great people.
One of the things you've highlighted there, which is really important, is I think like persistence and commitment to your vision, isn't it? I think that's a very important thing in being an artist.
And especially not only doing it, not only judging the value of it by how many did we sell and how many people gave us great feedback. Like most of people, when they do projects of all kinds, musical and entrepreneurial and everything, we've been brainwashed by our patriarchal money worshipping culture to think it was only worth doing. It was only successful if it made lots of money, if it got lots of feedback. But if you don't enjoy the process of doing it outside of whether those things happen, if you don't consider it worthwhile, time well spent, even if it didn't get big, then don't do it.
Yeah,
You do it to be devotional to music. You
yeah,
do it because you're just loving the process, and you can't not do it. You can't wait to see what it sounds like. One Giant Leap, we ended up getting a big budget to go around the world, but we would have done it for much, we were doing it anyway on
yeah,
a shoestring. We weren't saying we're only going to do it if we get a deal, if we get good money, if we da. So it's really important that your motivation, where you're actually springing from, where you're moving from, has to be the love of doing it,
yeah.
and that it's time well spent because you had a great time with the people you did it with, you learned stuff, you had joy, you had intimacy. You know, you've got to judge your value system by more than just did it reach Western ideas of success.
That said, have you ever had, you're absolutely right, and I agree with you. Have you ever had situations in which you've had a collaboration or project where it's been difficult and you've had to kind of, obviously there's been collaborative efforts and that's been joyful, but has there ever been a difficult project which you've had to kind of like force over the line? And how was that experience if you had that?
Yeah, the second One Giant Leap, What About Me, was harrowing. Um, me and Duncan, both of our dads died during the production. Um, I had a horrific experience with my then wife, and the family was falling apart, and the kids were gone, and I couldn't really function properly. And Duncan had to carry the ball for a great stretch of it, and that meant me and Duncan had huge ructions between us, and it was one of the most difficult. It produced one of the greatest things we ever did.
Yeah.
But bloody hell, it was really, really, it was heartbreaking for most of it.
It's quite interesting that though, that even when life is like that, as you're a creator, the kind of commitment to still create is quite an interesting thing because you're documenting your life, aren't you, as you're going, the process of making art when things are difficult. It's quite a brave and vulnerable thing to do, to carry on creating during times like that.
Yeah, I mean, the more brave, it's interesting this thing about brave and vulnerable. It's brave and vulnerable if you're working from a model that says it's very important what people think of you, that
Mm,
it's very important that you're seen to be a great artist. It's very important that it doesn't fail, or whatever your criteria for failure is. If you are working from that model, you need a lot of courage to do it.
okay.
If you're working from a model which says, look, people are going to like it, they're not going to like it, people might do this, there's no attachment to outcome. You can't control how it's going to do, where it's going to go, who's going to love it, who's going to share it with who. It's a mystery. If you accept that from the off and have no attachment to outcome, then it doesn't take nearly as much courage.
Interesting. I mean, you're obviously I'm aware of your work with in film and other areas of. I suppose coaching might be a way of quickly saying it, but Ramdas and people like Ramdas, for people that don't know, is someone who is a great proponent of wisdom, really. And it seems to me that you yourself have kind of the spirit, if you like, the spiritual journey is a major part of who you are and the way you look at your creativity. Is that true?
Yeah, and we've got to be careful with the word spiritual or
Yeah.
we don't. But for me, it's more like the human journey,
Yes. Yeah.
the challenges of being a human, the spirits, the gods, the goddesses. I love all the lyricism and the connection with all that. But the real actual action of the day and the decisions we make and the relationships we forge and the challenges we overcome and the patience and the all the things we have to employ and the equanimity, that's very much about our humanity more than the spiritual. I think it's very much about learning to navigate disappointment, to navigate expectations, to be spacious around other people's humanity, and that not everyone's always going to be polite or on form every day, and being, spacious around that. But they're very human challenges, I think, are the ones which see us through.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Um, in terms of kind of like creating with others, you said something about recognizing that not everybody is going to be on form on one day. So, in terms of collaborations, how do you approach it? Do you kind of like send out your music and just see what comes back? And how do you navigate that kind of sometimes if someone's not on form or maybe they're sending something back which doesn't work for you? How do you deal with that?
Well, usually people do send stuff back. I mean, if you're doing it, sending it back, usually we get in the room with the people and
Okay,
then no one's sending, you might send out, hey, this is the one we're going to work
sure.
on. But it's usually the first take is the best. So you
Yeah.
don't really want to give too much preparation.
Okay.
I don't think giving people too much time to think about it and prepare. Some people want to, and they need time to sit with it and let it percolate and do more preparation. Other people are just like, roll the tape, let's see what comes out. And I think, not to be judgmental, I think the best musicians just hear it right there and then and just jump in and
Yeah.
trust that the flow comes through their fingertips.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, there have been times where stuff didn't quite work and those bits don't end up on the record, and that's okay because we cast our net wide, for the 30 or 40 collaborations which end up on the record, there will have been probably 150 collaborations recorded,
Right.
and you just choose the cream.
Um, do you have a habit of creation in terms of musical creation or daily
No,
practice?
I don't really have a habit. I have long stretches where I don't do anything. I have long stretches when I'm just teaching creative workshops, or I'm writing fairy stories, or I'm attending to the very important business of sitting on my ass and not doing anything. Um, and I have a family. And then suddenly I get the idea in my head, oh, I want to do another Happening album, or I want to do this All Heart album. I have a little idea. Like there's one album I made which, never really got properly released, where I got to be in my bonnet that I wish Lauryn Hill had made a reggae album, not a R&B album.
Nice.
And I found this wonderful singer who sounded faintly like her in Johannesburg, called Aluta Lishaba,
Hmm.
and made this record called Aluta and the Mystics, which is on my website, which absolutely love that album. Hardly anyone knows it exists. But I just got an idea in my head and thought, oh, let's do this. And it's a great delight for me as an artist, again, because I don't, when I say I don't care what people think or I don't care how well it does, it's not like I don't care, like in a bullshit kind of like, but I'm non-attached. I
Yeah.
understand anytime I do a creative project, the likelihood that it's going to get even finished is slim. The
Yeah.
likelihood, if it does get finished, that anyone's going to like it or it's even going to get any kind of a release is slim. My expectations are incredibly low.
Okay.
So when anything works, it's a huge bonus.
Yeah. 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 That's very interesting. The non-attachment thing is, I think, that, it's certainly with artists that are younger. I think that kind of attachment. I went through that myself, where my band were doing quite well on radio, and then we spent quite a lot of money on the second album, and went through a process of sending the key single out to radio. All the people that had supported us and heard absolutely nothing for like 10 days, And it was one of those moments where like you kind of feel like you failed or you've missed an opportunity. And then they got round to it and heard it and played it and it was all fine. But actually making art and creativity and that process is actually quite a inward journey, isn't it? Into your humanity and into the shadows of your ego, if you like, and the shadows of what needs to come up for you to look at. Do you find that your process that happens to you as a creator?
It doesn't happen to me now,
Okay.
but I remember when, my first single for Faithless, which was called Don't Leave, was massively pipped to be, it was the first thing on the label that it ever had um, A-list Radio 1 airplay. And, everyone was like, oh, Jamie's gonna, this great singer, and it's like, it's all gonna be amazing. And then it kind of went in and out at number 23. And I really was like gutted, I was like, had really built myself up that we were going to have a hit there. And I learned very early on to massively lower my expectations and to not attach to how well it does and to not set myself up for that disappointment, to totally accept, the likelihood anyone's going to even know about this. And the same with the All Heart album, like we've put it out there, we've got quite a lot of lovely support from ecstatic dance DJs and dance teachers and stuff. But, you know, it's been out a month. I'm not sure we've sold 200 copies yet, and I don't know how one does. You just got to just hope people are going to share it with each other, enjoy it. You're never really going to know, and people don't really buy music anymore anyway. They listen to it on streaming platforms. So you just have to kind of be very open-handed and not have the criteria that says I'm worthwhile or my music is worthwhile if um, sometimes it might be it's better to have a very small crowd of people that adore you
Yeah.
than a big crowd of people who listen to it once and then not care. You know what I mean? Like, do it for the people that like it.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a couple of things that have come up since we've been speaking is, that the idea of insomnia kind of finding its way to Pride in Munich, I think you said. And, there is that thing, isn't there, where if you release it, you don't know, it's like the creation energy of that album or piece of work has actually got a kind of energy to it. And it will, I think, kind of find its way to whoever needs to hear it, or it will go on unexpected adventures. And if you have non-attachment as to where it goes, sort of seeing your baby sort of just
Mhm.
go where it goes is the joy of it, isn't it? Because you don't know
Yeah,
where
and
it goes.
knowing you won't see mostly where it goes. I
Yeah,
get letters still now for One Giant Leap saying I listened to it all the way through my journey through Asia and Australia. You just imagine somebody on a train with the headphones listening. You don't know who they are, what they're thinking, where they're going next. It's like, you have to let go of that mystery. You're not going to get the feedback from everybody who liked it. And even One Giant Leap, which we would probably all say was a very successful project, we've never had a single royalty check since the day that we released it. It never made us a penny.
wow, okay. That's quite interesting. It's funny to, like you said, because for me, like, listen to One Giant Leap, for example, it was so significant, but the mystery of you not knowing that is also part of the kind of joy of it as well. When you're talking about the mystery, obviously you said you don't have a habit musically, creation ideas come to you, but it seems like you're someone who's engaged with some type of uh, creative outlet from other workshops, writing fairy tales, music, or just being who you are in the world. I've spoken to lots of songwriters about where the idea of ideas come from, whether it's kind of something you self create yourself. A lot of people just think, they are making it. Other people think they're receiving things. What's your take on where ideas come from or the idea of the muse? Do you subscribe to that, or tell me
I
about
do.
how that works?
I do. I think music and creation is a yin receptive experience. And Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, has a wonderful TED talk on the subject
Right.
about this, the poem bouncing over the hill and it might land on you. And if you don't, when it lands on you, you don't have time to write it down. It'll carry on bouncing off and land on somebody else. She tells this great story about Tom Waits driving along and a song starts coming in and he gets so angry that he pulls the car over, jumps out the car and looks to the sky. He goes, can you not see I'm driving my car? I don't have a guitar with me. I don't have a pen. Now come and bring me, come and arrive when I get home in 45 minutes or fuck off and bother somebody else.
Yeah. It's funny that it happened to me this morning where my phone wasn't charged and an idea came. I was like, oh, this is the one I need to capture, and my brain tricks itself into thinking, don't worry, you'll remember this.
No,
I
like a dream.
didn't respond, and I knew that I should respond and capture it, and I've lost it now. And it was like one of those
Yeah,
things of like I was lucky to have that moment, but it went, okay, if you're not going to pay me attention, I'll go elsewhere.
yeah.
It's an elusive
There's
force.
a Philip Glass in his documentary. The composer Philip Glass is great about it. It's like, you show up, you sit down. My granddad was like this as well. My granddad was an author, and he said, you have to sit down at the desk. He goes, even if nothing comes, he used to write novels. He goes, I sit down at my desk at 9:30 in the morning, and I do not move from my chair till 1 o'clock, even if I only write one sentence. You've
Yeah,
got to act as if you have a boss that's
yeah,
telling you you can't get up. And then
yeah.
I get back to work at 2:30 and I stop at 5. And even if nothing comes, but you have, inspiration will come, but it has to find you waiting.
Yeah, very true. Um, who are your kind of influences or who are your current influence actually musically? Do you sort of have you someone who has like heroes, or is it more of a kind
Very
of
much.
you are?
I think my big main heroes would have to be, and they haven't changed for 30 years, Peter Gabriel, whose new album, by the way, is wonderful, in his 70s to produce something like that. I mean, there's a song on Peter Gabriel's new album called Live and Let Live. I don't know if you've come across it.
Not yet.
It's a good song. And then halfway through, the production, it just gets better and better. By the last 2 minutes, it's like, it's got the Soweto Gospel Choir, it's got Yusun Dor, it's just like so ecstatic and moving. And his slow songs on that record are amazing too. The Peter Gabriel, massive hero, Brian Eno, who we were lucky enough to work with on both One Giant Leaps,
Great.
Daniel Lanois as a producer,
Yeah.
and David Byrne. Absolutely love Talking Heads. Um, yeah, those are some of the real biggies.
And your kind of interest in and collaborative relationship with, let's just use the term sort of like real world musicians, as we mentioned, Peter Gabriel, the kind of not Western musicians.
Yeah,
Did that come from kind of the Gabriel influence, or is that something that
yeah, very much. So, until I was in my early 20s, all my music making was verse, chorus, bridge.
yeah,
And then I heard Passion, the Peter Gabriel music for the
I
Last
love that.
Temptation of
I love
Christ.
that. Yeah,
And I was just like, it just exploded my palette
yeah,
size.
yeah,
Suddenly I was hearing duduk,
yeah.
which is an instrument we put on everything. If you put a duduk on anything, it sounds amazing. I was hearing African rhythms. I was hearing music that didn't have a drum kit. I was hearing even Peter Gabriel's Us album as well,
Yeah.
which has no drum kits on it. It has Tony Levin, the bass player, playing these amazing rhythms on the bass where he's tied bits of bamboo to the end of his fingers.
Wow. Wow.
Um, and so this whole palette of African and Indian and other country music opened up to me where, it wasn't just major and minor keys doing the same 4/4 or 3/4 structure. It was something that, because it was a bit different and a bit more haunted and I'm not going to say discordant, but a bit less exactly fitting with 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3. It wasn't so, predictable. It kind of kept hitting my heart in such a moving way, especially the duduk. Um, so suddenly there was this like much more moving palette of sounds to play with, and also stories and the respect of master musicians who still play for many hours under the tree with their sarangi or whatever, like the people who aren't just now, you know, I'm not against the fact that it's much easier to make music even if you're not musically trained. I think that's great. You can just use your ear, prompt
Yeah,
something into a keyboard and it'll make it sound good. I'm not snobbish about that. But I also really, really honor those artists that actually know how to play their things
yeah,
incredibly. Like
yeah.
a guitarist like Dave Randall, who plays on all my stuff. He's a brilliant producer, composer, guitarist, was the guitarist in Faithless where we met. He just his fingers, he is his instrument, It's just his fingers are always going up and down, doing different scales up and down the neck of his, he's just like he's just a master musician, and I really, really, because I myself am not a master musician and I've never been disciplined enough to do very, very much which requires real hard graft and showing up even when you don't want to. I've never been very good at that. I have a huge amount of respect for people that do.
Yeah, I like the fact that it was almost like in a sense like the reverence and respect for people that do play for hours is that's their thing. But also there's that kind of like almost punk element of like which is in there in dance music, which is like I can create and that's fine, and I don't have to be too kind of reverent about what I'm doing. The kind of joining of those things and not judging yourself as someone who's not studying, but that kind of allowing all creativity
Sure.
to exist is important, I think.
Yeah, and that's why like when we were working with Brian Eno, Uncle Brian, as we love him call him,
Yeah.
he talks about how instantly he works. He has a keyboard that has 5,000 sounds on it, and there's one button that just randomizes seven different sounds and puts them together. And
Right.
he says that he's like working with you too. And he says, "Okay, I've got an idea, guys." And then he presses the red button as if it's something that he's pre-made, but he doesn't even know what it's going to sound like himself when he randomizes the sounds on his synthesizer. And sometimes it comes out great, and sometimes it doesn't. But he's a very instant creator, as am I. And Peter Gabriel is someone that will take 17 years to get the bass sound right. And that's why we were always saying to Brian, why don't you do a thing with Peter Gabriel, the two of you just like, and he said, I could never work like that. I couldn't wait around that long to do the next bit. I can't work at that slow pace. And I'm sure Peter doesn't like to work at Brian's immediate instant gratification pace.
Sure.
Um, so that's a great thing we're just going to have to live without. Um,
It would be nice to hear that though. It's a good I can see how one can imagine, you know, dare to imagine where that might lead.
mm,
You're someone who, from my point of view, is a bit of a creative polymath in the sense that you're not just a musician and producer. You make films, you write books, you hold creative workshops. Um, just to kind of come to your, it seems like you're a creative facilitator. Is that fair to say that? And what's your kind of um,
yeah, sometimes I'm more of a facilitator. Sometimes I'm more the artist who's composing the song like this. Um, I love all of it. I'm amazed that more creatives, some people when we did one go, how does it feel, Jamie, going from music now to film, or how does it feel now going to making movies about? And it's like I'm not going from one to the other. I'm not stopping this and doing that. This idea that you're only doing one thing and that's who you are now. I don't like you don't only, I like pasta, I like Thai food. Like, why would you only, if you're creative, write a fairy story if you get a mood to,
yeah,
write a self-help book,
yeah,
do a movie about your favorite teacher,
yeah,
um, write a pop song, like whatever. Why would anyone only do one of those things?
yeah,
Like have a bash at all of them. Have a bash at any of them that feel like they might be fun. One day I might paint a picture. Haven't
yeah,
done that since I was a child. Sometimes I have an idea for a picture. I've had ideas for sort of digital art that I'd like to do, which is all kind of working with beams triggering. You walk through something and it triggers a bit of film. Like as you walk through the space, you pass certain laser beams that trigger certain things on screens as you walk through. You have an idea for something, and sometimes you're in a room with someone and you mention the idea and they go, "How much do you reckon that would cost?" And I go, "I don't know, 20 grand." They go, "Yeah, I'll pay for that."
nice,
And then
nice.
you're doing it.
Yeah, 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 nice. You mentioned just then about making a film about your favorite teacher. Becoming Nobody is a beautiful film, and it's about Ramdas. Tell me about how that came together.
Well, Ramdas was very generously in both the One Giant Leap movies, and someone who's just been such a formative influence on my life since I was in my early 20s. The moment I heard him talking, he's such a beautiful sacred fool. He's such a beautiful comedian, stroke genius, spiritual teacher. He's just like the perfect balance of incredible wisdom, but not pretentious and not
Yeah,
shoving it down your throat,
yeah,
laughing at himself all the way, teaching from the middle of the mess, which I try to do too. Um, and then I was doing a film about another one of my heroes, Gabrielle Roth, who invented the five rhythms dance practice, and never finished that film. And there were various political and technical reasons why we couldn't finish that film. And I felt bummed about it because I really wanted to make the tribute to her. Um, and and then I realized I wanted to do one for Ramdas too. Like he is in a few films, but none of them are very funny. He's in like Fierce Grace, he's in other ones, and they're great. They're beautiful. Every film about Ramdas is wonderful, but none of them had got across his humor and his like the real essence of what I loved about him had never been even remotely captured
Yeah.
in any of the things he was in. And I was like, no, that needs to be remedied. So I rang up their people, his gang, and said, I want to make the definitive Ramdas movie, that really gets blown. I told them my spiel about the humor and the message, and really like the one-stop movie where if you've never heard of Ramdas and someone said you should check it out, you see this film, you get it. Um, and they went, yeah, great idea. Here's the keys to our archive. Go
Brilliant.
for it.
Brilliant. It's such a powerful movie because, and the reason it's so powerful is because you feel like you're in the room with him, and like you say, you really get a sense for kind of his humor, his frailty, his humanity, his wisdom. But you get a really rounded, like it is a one-stop film about him. It's an exceptional um piece of work because it allows him to be him. It allows it just is there. It's
And the music in that film is brilliant. Though I say so myself, it
it's
was
brilliant.
actually an album we'd done years earlier with Alex Forster, who's also another amazing producer, composer. Um, and we made a record called Internal Music for Dissolving, which was a very gentle, moving record. And when we placed it across the film, all these different tracks, it was like it had been made specially.
Yeah,
Suddenly realized why we made that album. It was like it was always meant to be the score for this
yeah.
movie.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because sometimes, like you say, some creations will come out on record, some will be shelved, some will come back later. And so there is like possibly there is a purpose to all instinctive creation, and you don't know when it's going to have its
Mm,
moment. But
totally.
yeah,
Yeah, and that was a great example of the internal tracks on that film. They really sound like they were always meant to be there. It was like, whoa, that really works. Such a lovely moment when you put this with that and something comes out the other end where everyone's going, whoa, that's really good. And you take the money and the credit, but all you did was say, I wonder what happens if we put this with that. It's like cooking. I want to put some of this and some of that. Oh, that's delicious. You didn't know it was going to be delicious, but everyone goes, oh, that was genius. Yeah, thank you so much. When all really you just did was, I wonder what would happen if we do that with that.
curiosity into just allowing yourself to be curious and play, allowing yourself to play and be
Yeah,
curious.
not minding when accepting that 19 out of 20 times it won't work. But you try out enough different stuff just by the law of averages, some of it's going to work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you said you write books? Is reading a massive part of for you?
Massive. Anyway, I won't tip the camera around, but if you could see the room I'm sitting in, that's just like, if there's any kind of a tremor, they're going to find me under a pile of books. Um, I have set up my life now to stop looking at reading as a luxury thing you get to do when you're not doing anything else. But I've done it the other way around now. I structure the everything else around the reading time.
Great,
So I have definitely at least 3 or 4 hours a day, which is dedicated to books. It might
fantastic.
be reading, it might be scrolling old covers of the Lithuanian print of Herman Hesse in,
Oh, I love Hess.
yeah, I love the old covers, I love the old prints, I love the first editions. I love reading. I don't keep any record of what I've read, which is so unlike me. Like I'm a real list maker. For some reason, I've never kept a list of everything I've read. Um, but I'm being so spoilt by what I'm reading at the moment. I also made a commitment to myself to only read fiction
Oh, okay,
because sometimes you can get into this thing of it, you're never going to hear anything new in another self-help book. Like,
right.
what are you suddenly going to read in the next Gabor Mate that's going to make you go, "Ah, of course." It's like, it's all just lots of different ways of saying the same thing. We don't need any more self-help books. It's been said, just fucking do it or don't do it. Don't pretend you don't know. Don't pretend you don't know what's going to make yours and everyone else's life better. You do. You don't want to do it. Fine. Go and do some internet shopping. That's fine. But don't pretend you need another self-help book. You don't. Fiction is where I'm really at. And everything from Ian M. Banks' sci-fi, which I think is some of the greatest literature that's ever been written, all the way to old stuff. I love Paul Auster, who very sadly died recently. Um, I'm just getting into my first Rose Tremaine novel that everybody said, God, you should have been reading her by now. Um, and I just love, yeah, I love reading. Like a holiday for me is basically around finding a nice place to sit and read.
Yeah, I feel,
That's what I go and find a beautiful nature spot, maybe with somewhere where you can swim, where there's nice food, and read all day.
yeah, that is my idea of heaven, actually. Just quickly, because Herman Hesse is a big influence. Do you have a favorite Herman Hesse novel?
I thought my favorite Herman Hesse novel was Narcissus and Goldmund,
Right.
and it kind of was. But then when I reread it recently, or not that re fairly recently, I was like, oh, I remember it being better than that. I remember loving Demian,
Yeah.
and of course Siddhartha is
Yeah.
his Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah.
And I love Journey to the East,
Yeah.
especially the message that it was the servant who turned out to be the master.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That's very up my alley.
It's interesting that because I think if any sort of Hess fans, if you're not a Hess fan, go and check it out. But I started with Wandering, then Demian, and then Siddhartha, and then Narcissus and Goldman, and it's that thing of it. He is for me, he's like I don't know, the way he writes is just like drinking water. It's so fluid and kind of just
Mm.
one of those voices which is just
Well, if
holds
you like
truth.
him, I recommend, if you haven't checked out already, the author Stefan Zweig,
Okay,
Zweig.
brilliant. I will do
You
that.
will be like delighted.
Brilliant. What kind of advice would you give? I mean, you've given a lot of advice actually in many ways here, but like, to new songwriters, what kind of advice to young kids that are kind of starting out and thinking about getting into making, creating music, writing songs, what kind of advice would you give them?
Trust your own taste. Don't try and do something that fits with what you think's doing well, or don't compromise what you're doing. Just be the first customer for what you're doing.
Nice.
Make records that you want to hear. Trust your taste, and there'll be other people that share your taste.
Yeah, brilliant. And in terms of like, you're someone who's really collaborated so much. Like, do you have any advice for people that um, will go into collaboration?
Yeah. Don't think just because you're low down the heap and you haven't done much stuff yet, that you can only reach out to other people who haven't done much stuff yet either. If One Giant Leap proves anything, no one did One Giant Leap because I was in Faithless. No one had heard of Faithless in most places in the world when I was doing One Giant Leap. Everyone, there used to be a whole range of agents and managers and linebackers stopping you from getting to the people who have done a lot of good stuff. But nowadays, everyone's so much more narcissistic and vain. They all check their own Instagram messages. Write to everyone you want to work with. Don't, if you want Daniel Lanois, write to Daniel Lanois. If you want, um, you know, Chris Martin, whoever you want, don't hold back. Write to them and see, if you write to 100 of them, four might say yes.
Yeah.
Um, and change your relationship with the word no.
Okay.
No doesn't mean your thing isn't good. No doesn't mean that you're not valuable. No just means they weren't the right one this week. That's okay. That doesn't mean anything about you. You just knock on the door. If it doesn't open, give it a quick rattle. If it doesn't open, next door. Doesn't It's not any more important than that. Just keep moving to the next door. Eventually some of them will open.
Lovely. Um, you worked with Michael Stipe and Robbie Williams on One Giant Leap, as well
Mm.
as real world musicians. Can you just give me a little insight, just from a fanboy point of view,
Yeah.
of that kind of process with those two?
Well, with Michael, he really, really made me believe in myself. He's much more than an artist or a
Yeah,
singer. He's I don't want to say a bodhisattva, but he radiates such love and such sincerity, as well as huge talent, that being around him and him liking your idea makes you feel. He kind of allowed me to value myself quite a lot by giving me a lot of encouragement. And and he's very generous, and just being around him did a lot of good for me.
yeah,
and he would spoil me, you know, like he was just really kind to me, and I love him. I will always love him, and he's very eccentric, um, and Robbie, I just feel for Robbie. I mean, I'm sure, I think now he's much happier, you know, like he's obviously found a great relationship. He's got a beautiful family, so I don't feel quite as worried for him as I used to. Um, but you know, when we were hanging out, which was a long, long time ago now, decades, um, you know, it was very hard for him, as it is for anyone who gets fame very young, is you suddenly now don't know who likes you for you and who likes you because of your status.
Yeah.
And that was very, very trying for him. And I think that he was like quite lonely within all the adulation, and I felt for him. And it's nice to see now from the recent documentary that he's obviously done a lot of growing up, and been, you know, loved back to health by this wonderful partner he's got, and lovely kids. So it was nice to see that he's, you know, he seems a much happier fellow.
Yeah, that's a very good documentary, that actually. And I you know, obviously I don't know Robbie, but I think one of the things I admire about him is he's kind of put it out there actually, and just kind of being, it seems quite honest about what he goes through, and actually that's quite an
Yeah,
endearing thing, you know.
yeah, exactly. He's very, very real, and it's funny because to be very, very real in one of the more superficial sectors
Yeah,
is, it can be a bit of a, like, the people who want that sector don't want real.
yeah,
So they can start looking at you as you're pretentious, or you're this or
yeah,
you're that, when you
yeah.
start getting real. And that, I think that's their problem, not the artist's problem. You just got to carry on being real.
I agree, and actually, like one of the things, like I had a great quote recently by Tom York saying that the thing he was trying to hide from people turned out to be the thing that people loved. And I think
So
that
true.
may be true of Robbie as well, in the sense that, like, actually what people found endearing was him kind of putting his heart on his sleeve, and that's actually what, his voice as an artist, you know. So it's,
Yeah, and the rap he did for One Giant Leap was very real, you know. Hello, Dad. You know, he talks very, very candidly to his dad in that rap about his loneliness, and everyone really appreciated that. Yeah, it was really, really good.
just a final couple of questions, and thank you for, you know, I've always kind of hoped one day that I would speak to you about creativity. So thank you for coming on to the podcast.
My pleasure.
Um, one of the questions I ask people, I'm going to ask you this in two ways actually, is if you could have been involved or written any song or track, what song or track would you have loved to have written or been involved with?
Something Inside So Strong by Lavi Siffre.
Great choice. Great choice. That's a beautiful song. Um, and if there is a collaborator that you're dead or alive that you wish you would could have or would love to collaborate with, who would be that person?
Apart from Jesus.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, how amazing would it have been? I mean, I think they'd chase me out the room. I wouldn't last 5 minutes, but assuming what I'm gonna I'm gonna assume from your question that they would like to work with me too.
Yes.
Miles Davis.
Oh, nice. So it would be great somewhere in some dimension. There is a Jamie Catto album with Jesus and Miles Davis.
Yes. I think all my albums are Jesus and Miles Davis. Now you think about
Yeah, but now you sort of put those two out there. You can kind of actually, there is that, there is an element in
it.
that.
Jesus doing the lyrics,
Jesus, can you imagine
Miles Davis doing the lyrics,
Jesus doing the
and
lyrics?
me shouting from the back to turn up the bass.
And if you could invite one guest to have dinner with, would that be Jesus?
I think it would be one of those guys.
Okay.
A Jesus, a Buddha, a Muhammad, a Krishna, a, you know, one of the heavy hitters. I'd like to, you know.
One of the big, yeah, one of the big three or four. Brilliant. Jamie, thank you so much for your time and for being such a wonderful guest today on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
It's been beautiful. Thanks for inviting me anytime.
Thanks, man.